I don't want to see your penis in my bathroom. And I don't care what your orientation is. We're paying NGOs to tell illegals how to migrate to our country and then how to vote when they get here. There are men, there are rapists in federal prison right now, in the women's prison, because they identify as a woman.
Pleasure to finally meet. How are you?
Thank you, and thanks for coming down here to Charleston, South Carolina.
You're all over X. I think you're fighting a pretty polarizing cause, and it's I'm pretty excited for this discussion because we were initially planning to talk about the hearing, the UAP hearings, the UFO hearings.
Yeah.
And that's exciting within itself.
Right.
The findings and the secrecy there, which I'll probably ask you some questions later on about it.
Right.
But then everyone's talking about what's going on with Congresswoman McBride. But can you just give us an overview of, for anyone listening that hasn't been keeping up with the news, what triggered this and what is the actual fight that you're leading?
Well, first of all, I want to say this fight for me as a woman is worth fighting for. And I am going to go to the mat for women all across the country because the left is trying to erase us. And so I filed a piece of legislation a week ago that said on Capitol Hill that women's spaces, so bathrooms, dressing rooms, locker rooms, could only be used by biological women. And 2 days later, the Speaker of the House agreed to that policy and made that policy change. Since that time, I've heard from women all across the country who want to see this go across the nation. So I filed a bill last week on Wednesday that would do the same thing for women on all federal property. I'll be filing a third bill in a couple weeks that if you have federal funding in any capacity, wherever you are, women get their own private space. It cannot be invaded by men. I have a prison bill that I'm going to do. That'll be the fourth bill. I mean, because there are men, there are rapists in federal prison right now, in the women's prison, because they identify as a woman. So women in prison are being assaulted. They're being invaded by chicks with dicks, basically. I mean, I don't want to see your penis in my bathroom. And I don't care what your orientation is. I've voted for gay marriage multiple times. I have supported LGBTQ protections, but we have to draw a line in the sand for women. And for me as a woman, just the idea of a man with his junk being in my dressing room, me being forced to undress in front of a man, it's a trigger for me. I'm a survivor of rape. I'm a survivor of domestic violence and abuse. And the idea of it, I can't even comprehend in what world this would ever be okay. And so I've taken up the mantle. I've gotten a huge amount of support from women of all political stripes and all orientations that said, you're right, enough is enough. They're not going to erase us. We have rights.
A lot of support, but you're also getting a lot of attacks as well, which we're going to go through, a lot of death threats. But let's discuss the issue. Funny enough, I'd say I've been doing shows for years now, for 2 3 years. And there's two issues that are always the most polarizing. I get attacked the most, more than Trump versus Biden.
Really?
One of them is the war in Gaza. Second one, I want to talk about this issue of transgender rights. It's one that many people don't even want to touch. They're too scared to even talk about it. You've sensed that, yes?
Yes.
Whereas you can have an opinion about it. You can be okay. You can say, hey, I'm okay with men that identify as women to go into women's bathrooms, or I'm completely against it. You can have that opinion. But I feel like people that are against it, especially people that are against it, are too worried to say, hey, I'm against, similar to your position, I'm against it, and explain their position. And I feel it's because they feel like they're going to get cancelled. But this is also shifting recently. Do you know what I'm talking about? That kind of fear, because I had it for a while. Exactly.
There's an inherent fear, because these people, they're lunatics, and they're organized. And they're dangerous. I mean, they tried to cancel Dave Chappelle for telling a joke. These are people that want to ban comedy because they don't agree with you politically. Look at what's happened to J.K. Rowling, the way that the number of death threats she's had. And she's on the left side of the aisle, but she wants women to be protected. And they threaten to kill her every single day. I mean, I looked at last week, and I had no idea it would strike the kind of chord that it did. I was getting hundreds of death threats a day. I mean, we're talking about 0.5% of the population who want to kill me because I want to protect women and girls in their private, most intimate spaces. And that's how deranged this is. And you look at the left, Democrats, they want to erase women. They want to eliminate our rights. But at some point, we have to pick up the mantle and say no. And we're going to hold the line and keep these sick men, these gender-confused men from coming into our spaces. And I've read now story after story after story of underage girls or adult women who've had really scary encounters of men in their private spaces. And I hope that I'm giving women across the country the courage and the bravery to no longer be afraid. You're not going to be canceled for standing up for women. And it's weird that now conservative women, Republicans, we're now feminists. How did this happen? And I'm here for it. I'm here for the fight. I've broken a lot of glass ceilings as a woman. I'm the first woman to graduate from the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina. I'm the first Republican woman elected to Congress from the state of South Carolina. I mean, I've been breaking glass ceilings all my life, I feel like, and this shouldn't be controversial. I shouldn't be threatened to be killed because I want to protect myself as a rape victim from a man being in my private spaces.
Let's go through the issue, just kind of simplifying it. So essentially, it's weird that this is even an issue. There is men's bathrooms and women's bathrooms. Now, where it gets murky is that, okay, so if you've got a man that went through the process and identifies as a woman, I don't know where that line is where, okay, you identify as a woman, but you've still got the genitalia of a man. Should they be able to go into a women's bathroom? And obviously, I try to always be in the middle on every issue, but it's hard. Like, if I had a daughter, that's the best way I look at it. If I had a daughter, would I be okay to know that a woman that was a man or a biological man is in that bathroom, even if they identify as a woman? It becomes a serious potential risk to my daughter.
It does.
So that's where that line is very, very tricky. Now, what are solutions? Would you say, because the counter argument to that would be like these, and there's some statistics as well. I'll read one out for you here. 59% of transgender people say they've had to skip using a bathroom because they feared confrontation. They're worried about, so if a man identifies as a woman, they're worried about going to men's bathroom. What's your solution? You're a biological male, you have to suck it up and go into the men's bathroom? Or do you think there should be a third bathroom, which is very costly? It's like $6 billion if you want to have a third bathroom for transgender individuals. What do you recommend?
Well, some spaces have unisex bathrooms already, but my ideology is based on science. If you were born a biological male, use the men's restroom. Your discomfort isn't my problem. I want to protect women and girls everywhere. And this is more than about bathrooms. This is more than about locker rooms. This is more than about men and women's sports. This is more than men taking women's scholarships away, men taking women's achievements away. This is about the rights of women and girls. Are we going to be recognized and are our rights going to be protected, or are they not? So I'm not asking people to drop trowel. I think it's pretty obvious when there's someone who's confused about their gender. I think it's pretty obvious who they are. I'm not asking for guards outside the gate or outside the bathroom door. I'm just asking for common sense. Do we as women have rights? Do girls have rights to be protected? Is Title IX a thing? Or are you going to erase us? At the end of the day, it's a very simple argument. And I'm not going to allow some man's mental health issue become my new normal. I'm not going to allow 0.5% to force their problems on me. It's not my problem.
How can we enforce something like this? I know you said dropping one's trouser is not feasible, but having security guards is also not feasible.
Oh no, absolutely not.
Have you thought about how to enforce such a law, or is just let's at least have the law there so everyone's an understanding that this is how it should operate?
This is it should be the law. It should be the policy, and if someone violates it, then there should be some sort of a consequence to that, whether that's fines or charges, whatever that is. There ought to be consequences for it, because I've been hearing and reading about story after story after story that put underage girls in danger. We have half the country are women, and more than half of those women are going to be abused at some point in their life by a man. And if we open this Pandora's box, allowing, forcing women to undress in front of men, forcing women to use the bathroom with men. All we're going to do is make women more vulnerable. And it's misogynistic, it's sexist, and I'm just not going to stand for it. I've worked too hard, and I've just been through too much to allow men or the radical left to erase us. And it seems like the only places is a problem are with Democrats on the Hill. Like, I literally was at an event Thursday, and some gender confused guy in a dress tried to rush the stage. And my colleague, Khanna, who's a member of Congress, literally seconds after this guy rushed the stage at me, went and defended the guy who rushed the stage at me. We were at the same event, and I've done so much work with Roe. We've co-sponsored bills together. I always thought he thought of me as an equal. I am his equal. But to hop on board and defend a man that tried to rush the stage, physically rush the stage at me, what he did was indefensible.
What did Khanna say?
Oh, he defended the guy in a dress who was trying to rush the stage to attack me. And, Khanna doesn't respect women. He doesn't respect me as a female colleague of his. And that's where we are now. That's what I want to expose to people, is that the left doesn't respect women. I've been saying it for a long time now, but we're actually seeing it unfold in real time. And the left is losing on this issue. They're losing on the policy. They're losing on the message. They really should take a seat.
Yeah, and I want to get to that because politically it's not making sense. That fight has already lost. And do you remember the Trump campaign ad where, I can't remember what it said, something along the lines of, Kamala is for he, she, Trump is for you. And that worked really well for Trump.
Yep.
So it's a bit weird that fight is still, from a political perspective, is still being fought. But I want to go back to what really triggered it. What got you to take on this fight? Was it Congresswoman McBride's getting elected to Congress?
Well, certainly that was an issue of it, because it's hitting us smack in the face, and there wasn't a policy for this. And so it was my determination to ensure that we have policy. So I suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, from sexual abuse, from domestic abuse that I suffered a deeply traumatic event about a year ago. And I've been diagnosed with PTSD over the course of the last year. I have lost 30 pounds. I have insomnia. I have a lot of symptoms, and I've been diagnosed with PTSD. And just the idea that a man could be in our locker room watching us to undress. So we have a female locker room, a female gym at the Hill. The idea that a man would be in our private spaces, in our dressing room, our locker room, or in the bathroom stall next to us is repulsive. It's disgusting, it's offensive, it's perverted. And having gone through this horrific experience and having PTSD, this is absolutely a trigger for me. But I'm not the only one. There are millions of women out there like me that suffer the same consequences of abuse as I have. And I will fight like hell to protect all women and to protect all underage girls, because I know how vulnerable they are when they believe they're in a private or intimate setting. I know what men can do to women, and I won't allow it. I will die on this hill. I will not allow a man to abuse women. I won't open this door. I will slam it in the face of the left, because I am that adamant about fighting for women's rights and protecting all women and girls.
I'm sorry to hear. I think it's important. I'm glad you've brought it up. Obviously you don't have to answer any of those questions, but to kind of, for anyone listening, especially people that are very critical of you and people that are sending you death threats, to understand where you're coming from. So essentially that traumatic experience lasted for a period of time, and that led you to take on this fight of protecting women's rights, which include transgender women accessing women's bathrooms. Yeah,
so I was raped at the age of 16. I've been very public about this. So there was a fight in the state legislature a number of years ago doing a fetal heartbeat bill, and there were no exceptions for women who'd been raped or girls who were victims of incest. So I told my story of being raped for the first time in 2019, and I got it changed. I did an amendment. We were the first state in the country that had exceptions for women who'd been raped or girls who were victims of incest. Fast forward to 2023, November of 23, I had a deeply traumatic experience that I will not go into detail right now. I'm not ready for that yet. But I had a deeply traumatic experience at the hands of an abuser. and have since lost 30 pounds. I've been diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and I know how vulnerable women and girls are in private spaces, and it's just the idea, it just sends me right over the edge. I just can't even, I want to protect myself, I want to protect other women who are vulnerable, and make sure that this never happens on our watch, and I want to give women a voice. We're seeing women all around the country in state legislatures. You're seeing Texas try to do legislation modeled after my bill. There are legislators in South Carolina that are going to be filing bills modeled after my federal legislation. I'm talking to women in other countries that want to do the same thing, and I hope I've given them a voice and say, this is okay. We're not going to be canceled because we're fighting for our rights. We're the feminists now, and we're going to make sure that we start this change. I mean, there were young girls in California just a few weeks ago. They simply wore a shirt that said "Save Girls Sports." They were suspended from school, they were called Nazis, and now they have to sue over their First Amendment rights. And I hope that more women and underage girls will speak up and sue whomever they have to make sure that they guarantee and protect their own rights, because we as women have to stand up to this nonsense.
That one, so I was with Dr. Gadsad, I think a week ago. We did an interview, and I brought up this issue, and I said we brought up transgender women, so transgender men in women's sports. And I told him, I'm like, I want to try to understand both sides, but I struggled with that one. That was a tough one. I just could not understand why you'd allow a man to be in women's sports. And I asked him, like, can you make the counter argument? Obviously, he's in a similar position. He's against it. But I asked him, like, can you help me objectively make the counter argument? He did. It still wasn't a strong argument. So that goes to my question is, from a logical perspective, I'm sure your colleagues as well, those that disagree with you in the House, are intelligent people. So why are they still fighting this fight, knowing how politically it backfired on the left and on Kamala Harris?
I think they're afraid of their base. I think they're afraid of the far left activist base. These are the same people who are protesting Israel. These are the anti-Semitics. These are the pro-Hamas wing of the Democrat Party. The anti-Semites, the pro-terrorist, pro-Hamas category of the Democrat Party. Democrats are afraid of this violent wing of their party. I mean, it's all the same people. They were the ones burning cities down over Black Lives Matter. They're the ones that are violently attacking Jews. They're Jew haters. These are the same people. And they just want something to be angry about. They want an excuse to be violent. And that's all this is about. And it's like, do we have a society based on civility and keeping people safe, or are we going to have anarchy? At the end of the day, that's what this is about too.
You also said earlier, you said you called these people lunatics. They're organized and dangerous. So I'm guessing you're talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, the minority of the transgender community.
Yeah.
Because is there others within that community? Caitlyn Jenner would probably be a good example. That
Caitlyn Jenner doesn't want men and women's sports.
Exactly.
I mean, she has a very reasonable, logical, common sense, and I don't mind Caitlyn Jenner. She's not invading my private spaces. She's not doing any of that. And there are a handful of transgender women who've come out and come forward and say, Nancy Mace is right. But a lot of those folks, they're afraid to, because if you see, I posted some of the death threats online.
Yeah, I did.
Some of the phone calls, some of the videos people are posting, threatening to kill me over bathrooms. I mean, threatening to kill me over the idea that I don't want women forced to undress in front of men. It's insane to me. But there are a handful of folks in that community, not enough. I mean, if you go on some of these places, whether it's Blue Sky or Reddit, where the violent rhetoric from these people, it's really, truly, it's scary.
You had death threats of people filming themselves?
Oh yeah, threatening to kill me, 100%. And none of them have been arrested. Not a single one that has threatened me has been arrested
Their
yet.
identity was...
One of them, I posted one of the earliest threats I got online on Instagram. The law enforcement misidentified the person. I mean, me and Andy were the ones that figured out who it was. Like, the law enforcement didn't identify the right person. And I got over 1,000 death threats last week, easily. We just couldn't keep up. It was just so many, we couldn't keep up with them.
How are you dealing with it? How are the kids dealing with this?
They're doing well. We had to have, a couple conversations last week about safety. and I had to refresh my staff about safety and our security protocols. I have increased my own private security. I have more than one security guard when I'm out. I get stopped everywhere I go right now. Like last week, someone tried to rush the stage. I was at the airport. I was being guarded by Capitol Police at the time at the airport, and someone tried to accost me both verbally and potentially physically, the way that they were using their body to kind of lean into me and go at me. And then I had someone just 2 days ago, it was like I was accosted 3 times in public in 3 days, throwing up a phone in my face and getting in there. I've had to tell a number of people to fuck off. Like, I just don't have I have a zero tolerance policy. Their intimidation, their bullying, their threats on my life aren't going to stop me. And in fact, it's only going to make me double down, because it just proves my point about how rabidly insane they are, and we must put a stop to it before it goes any further.
Let's understand your position a bit further. So, so if I understand you don't want transgender women to enter women's bathrooms. I personally think that's a very logical position to have, even for someone on the left, even the far left. Now, if someone would, if a man, a biological man that identifies as a woman, etc., dresses up as a woman, if they want you to refer to them as she and her, would you accept that or not?
I think the pronoun idea is stupid. I mean, I have in the past respected pronouns, but I don't think it should matter. I mean, you're born a male, you're a male. If someone gets misgendered, who cares? Like, I mean, truly, who really cares at this point? But I do my best to use whatever pronouns people want, but if I don't, so what?
I want to read out a post, I think it was a quote you made in 2021. I strongly support LGBTQ rights and equality to kind of, and let me know if that position has changed.
Oh, it hasn't changed at all.
I strongly support their rights. No one should be discriminated against. I have friends and family that identify as LGBTQ. Having been around gay, lesbian, and transgender people has informed my opinion over my lifetime. So essentially you're saying you don't mind their rights, you don't mind even referring to them in whatever pronoun they'd like.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't infringe on women's rights. And look, I voted for gay marriage, not once, but twice. If you're gay and you want to be as happily or miserably married as a straight couple, more power to you. And I don't believe the government has the right to tell you who to love. The government doesn't have the right to tell you how to dress, right? And so I think there are inherent rights that every human has. But at the same time, how are we going to protect women's rights? Because we have rights too. So I'm good up until the point that you are infringing on women's rights. And that point starts at the very high bar of women aren't going to be forced to undress in front of men. I mean, that's like that's like the bare minimum. But I've voted for legislation. I've been attacked. I've been primaried in Republican primaries for being pro LGBTQ. I have sponsored legislation. I have voted for bills that protect those rights. But women have rights too. And the transgender community doesn't get to infringe on women's rights. Period. End of story. We have rights, and I'm going to fight to protect them.
Considering your position and your support of their rights, of LGBTQ rights, it's a bit weird and ironic how you're the one fighting this fight. Could be an indication that, or another indicator how the left have just gone too far, and that's probably what cost them the election. Have you spoken to Congresswoman McBride privately about this?
No, I haven't.
Would you be open to?
I'm open. I'm always, as I always have said, I'm open to anyone. I'm willing to work with anyone who's willing to work with me. I've always stated that, and I'd always be open to working with anyone on either side of the aisle. Always have been.
Again, her position was, I think from memory, she did say she's fine using men's bathrooms, but she also said that this was a distraction. I can't remember the exact quote, but she called this a distraction for more important issues. Does it seem like she's gonna be taking on this fight, or she's gonna just accept leave that fight alone and focus on other things? Do you know what her position
Well, she
is?
only admitted that she would stay out of our spaces after I brought up the issue, brought up the topic.
Did she fight for being able to access?
Oh, she was going to. I mean, she was on the media all over the place. I mean, she was utilizing her identity to move the needle even further to the left. And I wanted to make very clear that there was a line in the sand that we weren't going to tolerate, that as women, we weren't going to have that shoved into our private spaces. But I'd be willing to work with her or anyone on any issue when we agree on it. I've always been that way.
Yeah, what's weird.
And in fact, I'll say even more, I'm the 22nd most bipartisan member of Congress because of the work I've done on both sides of the aisle. Like, I'm not like 400th. There are 435 members of the House. I'm 22, one of the most bipartisan members of Congress in this session. So you can't say I'm like, this extremist when I'm,
Yeah, she called you a far-right extremist, which I thought was
crazy.
with a bit of an exaggeration.
It's violent. I mean, to call me an extremist like that.
It's the same rhetoric that really backfired against
Correct.
when they used it against Trump.
That's why I'm getting death threats.
Okay, you think using
Oh, absolutely. Her using that rhetoric against me, 100% puts my life in danger. 100%. Anyone that uses that rhetoric against me being a voice for women's rights puts my life in danger.
Do you think she has the right to run for Congress?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
So I think
she has the right to wear a dress. Like, I don't care how she dresses. I do not care. That's not what this is about. This is about inherently as women, are we going to allow ourselves to be vulnerable in front of men, allow them to invade our spaces, our private spaces? And the answer is hell no.
Now, so you have another bill where you want to apply this across all federal facilities.
Property.
Okay. So essentially, in all federal property, biological men cannot enter women's bathrooms, and I assume vice versa.
Correct.
Okay. Now, I know I asked this earlier, but from a practicality perspective, would you be looking at installing multi-sex?
No. That this bill will not spend any money
because the cost is about $6 billion according to estimates.
There's no money to do that in this bill, but it protects women. And federal property includes our federal prison system. We've all heard stories about men, rapists in fact, that are housed in women's prisons, and then the government paying for their sex change surgery. Like, if you want to change your sex or chop off your willy-nilly, okay, that's fine. The government, number one, shouldn't be paying for it. Number two, these men shouldn't be housed in women's facilities because, again, it makes women vulnerable and increases the percentage of women who are going to be victims of abuse.
The counter argument to this is that there hasn't been any statistics to show, and if there is, do let me know. There hasn't been any statistics to show that this is an issue yet. What's your position on that argument? Is it, we don't want it to be an issue, that's why you're acting, or you have other statistics to show that there is a lot of reports of violence?
One, we want to prevent it from happening, first off. We need to stop this fast in its tracks before it gets any further down the road. We need to stop it right now. But secondly, we've all read stories about this happening. We've read about rapists raping men who identify as women, raping women in women's prisons. That is a thing. It has happened. We know about the Loudoun County story, for example, in Virginia. One of the reasons Glenn Youngkin won that governor's race was the father of that girl who was raped in a girls' restroom at her school. The father was arrested when he brought it up to the school board. I mean, it was all caught on tape. It was on video. It was in Loudoun County. It was the year that Glenn Youngkin, it was weeks before the Virginia gubernatorial election. But this guy's daughter was raped in a bathroom at his daughter's school by someone who identified as a girl.
And he got arrested?
Yeah, the father did for speaking out at the school board meeting. There's videotape of it. There was a lot of media coverage at the time that this happened, but there is headline after headline after headline of this kind of thing happening. So I want to put a stop to it now before it gets any further.
And you're getting a lot of support for so you're focusing on federal property, also focusing on the prison system. Is that where you stop, or is it going to continue beyond that?
No, it'll continue. I have another bill that would, any facility that gets any federal funding anywhere in the country, we're not going to allow it there either. I mean, this needs to go nationwide. It needs to be global. And I'm hearing from legislatures all across the country, and I hope that we started a movement.
What do you think about this? So there was a bill in North Carolina in 2016. and it apparently caused a lot of issues. So businesses pulled out, events were cancelled, and the state said they've lost almost $4 billion in revenue over 12 years. Do you think the tide has shifted now? Or are you worried about having a similar backlash?
I'm not worried about backlash. I mean, I know I'm on the right side of history. This is an issue that even Democrat women care deeply about. It's not just Republicans, it's not just conservatives. This reaches across the aisle, and everyone knows that I'm right. Everyone knows this is common sense. This is logic. And the idea that someone's going to pull advertising out because rape victims don't want to be forced to undress in front of men, that's how far gone the left is. And if they want to defend that, by all means do that, and we'll continue to win, and we'll continue to change the hearts and minds of people who used to be Democrat. We will bring them into the Republican Party, because for some people this is just a bridge way too far. And you saw this election, the presidential election, Kamala Harris won women to a lesser extent than Biden did 4 years earlier. So in the 2020 race, Biden won women by plus 13. This year, Kamala won women by plus 8. There was a 5-point difference, 5-point spread difference in the last 4 years. And that spread will continue to decrease for Democrat candidates, because we're on the right side for women here. Republicans will protect women. I've been saying it for years. And now we're seeing this unfold in real time, how much harm they want to really do to us.
Harm they're doing to themselves. Again,
Yeah.
we talked about the political implications. But I'm going to mention two statistics and ask two separate questions. So this year, there was a report that says 45% of people support letting transgender women use women's bathrooms, so almost half the population. So that's on one point. My question is, still half of Americans are okay with women, biological men that identify as women, using women's bathrooms. So that's number one. And number two is the number, though, has dropped. It was 53% 4 years ago that were okay with women using women's bathrooms. But it went down. It's trending downwards, which is different to other countries in Europe, Canada, which we're going to get to Canada as well, where the opposite is happening. More and more people are becoming okay with it. So my question to you is, what would you say to the half of Americans that don't have an issue with it? And then the other part of the question is, why do you think we're trending downwards in that number in the US?
I think we're trending downwards because more people are seeing it. They're seeing it in their kids' schools. They're seeing it at the workplace, and they don't like it. It's offensive. And so I think that's why you're seeing the downtrend. If it's 45%, I would imagine a year from now it's going to be less than that, because we have exposed this issue. When it sits there right in your face, and when people are confronted with it, they don't want it. I think it's one thing when you think about it in the distance, you don't see it, you're not seeing it day in and day out. But now that we're all sort of being illuminated now to this problem, less and less people are going to be okay with it, because the stories of women coming out who've been discriminated against. I mean, there was a story in another country, I can't remember which country it was, where some guy in a pink frilly, childlike bikini was showering next to underage girls in their locker room. I mean, these stories we're hearing are just insane, and the mom was told to get over it, that it was totally normalized and totally okay. It's not okay. We shouldn't be exposing little girls to penises in the locker room. It's crazy to me. And so I think as parents, as they see more of it at their schools, I mean, now they've got like kindergarten books, like educating 5-year-olds on gender, on what their gender identity is. This should not be taught in public schools. Like, this is so off the rails. And the more that people learn about it, the less they're going to support it. It's crazy.
Are we seeing that shift away when it comes to children? Has there been any change in the recent months? Because I know a lot of people have become a lot more vocal about it.
I think I am constantly being educated on the issue. The stuff that I see, I'm like, this can't really be happening.
But are we still trending to which path?
I think we're trending as more conservative on the issue, more protecting children and more protecting
that number,
women.
as I said, 53 to 40%.
It's trending down, according to your statistics, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then you look at up north in Canada, 70% of people support letting transgender individuals use bathrooms that matches their identity rather than their biological sex. And we see similar numbers in Europe. So one argument is that the US, and I know what you're going to say probably, but is that the US is heading in the wrong direction relative to the rest of the Western world. Why the contrast between Europe and Canada? What's happening in the US? Why are we seeing that massive shift in the States? Trump's victory, the landslide victory is one example of that. I'm just trying to figure out why what's happening here is not happening in the West, and whether the West, do you think other countries, Europe,
well, I think
Canada
they
will
forced
follow?
it on their people. I mean, there are people you hear about that don't agree with it all. I've been in unisex bathrooms in Europe. I don't like it. I feel uncomfortable as a woman. It doesn't make me feel safe.
Is it when it's unisex, you just walk in, it's like everyone's just next to each
Correct.
other? Very normal bathroom.
Yeah,
And is there
but it doesn't feel
urinals for the
safe.
men as well?
It doesn't feel safe.
And there's the urinals for men.
Yeah. I mean, going into one of those bathrooms doesn't feel good, doesn't feel safe. And when I travel a lot, I travel all over the world. I try to avoid that as much as I can because I don't like it. Doesn't make me feel safe, and it's just not okay, in my opinion.
Understood.
But in Europe and in Canada, I mean, they have literally made it law, and I've heard from so many women from Canada, some women from Australia, from the UK, from England, from countries in Africa where they're not okay with this, but they don't have a voice. They don't get a say because it's been shoved down their throats.
Again, as I said, your stance is very logical. I also empathize with the other side. There's some that are too extreme, the ones sending you death threats. Obviously, you can't empathize with them. But there's others, and I'm going to give you another statistic here. There's a 2023 survey by the National Center for Transgender Equality found that 60% of transgender people avoided using public restrooms entirely out of fear. This led to severe health issues like dehydration and kidney problems. On top of that, 41% said they'd seriously thought about suicide in the past year, with lack of safe bathroom access being a major contributor to their stress and isolation. So, didn't expect it to be that big of a problem, but it is. What would you say to those people, the 53%, 50-60% of transgender people that are facing issues, having to go into the bathroom of what they don't identify as?
Well, if they're suicidal over using a bathroom, clearly it's a mental health issue. I mean, I would hope that they're getting the mental health counseling that they need to do better and feel better. Like that's insane to me. That we should make women and girls vulnerable for a very tiny percentage of the population who very clearly has some kind of mental health
So
issue.
the solution is not letting them go into women's bathrooms.
Correct.
The solution is finding other alternatives.
Well, there are plenty of single stall facilities where it's male or female, one person uses it at a time. There are plenty of places in public that have that, and if you're in a blue city, there are unisex bathrooms, et cetera. But like, there are plenty of places where, I mean, I've used, and I don't have a problem with this, if there's a single stall bathroom, one person can go in, one person can come out. We've all been to restaurants where it's just, you take your turn, one person at a time. Why is that such a complicated concept or idea?
Yeah, last point on this before moving to the military is, again, I know some people bring up the enforcement aspect of it. My counter to that is that, we don't have people enforcing men not to go into women's bathrooms. Men just don't do it. Like, if I get in there, I feel horrible. I've done it a couple of times. I just go in there by accident. I feel terrible. I apologize like 1,000 times.
Yeah.
So I think once it's law, it's just human nature that will follow those laws.
We should just be normal. Like, just be a normal human and respect the rights and dignity of women. I mean, that's really it at the end of the day. That's all we're asking for.
Now, another piece of news that came out, was not confirmed, but there's been reports, and I'm not sure if you've spoken to Trump or anyone from his cabinet about this issue, but there's been reports of Trump wanting to sign an executive order to discharge all transgender military personnel. A few thousand, I don't know, 15,000 of them. So my question to you first is your thoughts on this. If it is a plan of President Trump, do you support it?
I mean, if he does it via executive order, I'd be fine. So one of the things I learned today, and I just put it out on social media, is if you have ADD and you're prescribed Adderall, you cannot go into the military, U.S. military. But if you have a mental health issue and you are confused about your gender, you can go into the U.S. military, even though you can't deploy because of the medicine you have to be on, and the government will pay for your sex change. So if you're ADHD, I mean, I've been my entire life. But if you're ADHD, you can't go into the military. But if you got a mental health issue, you cross-dress, you can go in the military and the government will pay for your sex change. That doesn't make any sense to me. Now, I have said in the past regarding transgender service members, leave it up to the military command. Let them decide how they want to handle it. Because, I'm of course getting educated on a lot of this. The hormones that they're using, I didn't know that they weren't deployable until recently, until the last week or so. So that also changes the barometer a little bit. But I've always said, let the military command decide, because they're the ones in the trenches. They're the ones in combat. Let them decide, can they serve and in what capacity can they serve? Because I think everybody, if they're qualified, should be able to serve. That's my position. That's always been my position.
I was waiting to say that's my position as well. I think the military should decide, because I think you should, the person to fight, the military would know who's capable. So, for example, your tweet is an interesting tweet. I think it makes a good point.
Yeah.
And then if I want to counter it, I'd say, but if you've got ADHD, you're not capable of being on the battlefield because you've got ADHD. But if you identify as another gender, you should still be able to hold a gun and not have the repercussions of ADHD. So that's, I think my position is similar to yours, that the military would know which one will impact your performance.
The military can decide who's capable of serving, who's capable of being in the trenches, who's capable of being in combat or supporting. There are lots of jobs in the military that don't require combat. Logistics, supply chain, quartermaster. There are all sorts of jobs available for someone that doesn't need to be deployed. And we already have low recruiting. We already have issues, but I want to see us be the strong fighting force with whomever. I also think if you want to become a citizen, you should be able to serve in the military and then get citizenship after. I mean, there's a place for everybody to serve, but it's just ensuring we don't go off the rails with it. So like, you can't go in because you have ADD, but you can go in if you're confused about your gender and being on all this medicine and hormones. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. So, but I want our military command to decide. That's the way it should be. They can decide who's able and qualified to serve and who's not. That's what their job is.
Exactly, that's their expertise.
It's common sense.
Talking about Trump, and I want to move on to the UAPs, which is a topic that's been fascinating me. But President Trump did say in 2016 when he was asked, not sure if you've seen the clip, I just literally watched it just before the interview. He was asked on whether he's okay with, can't remember the exact question, but he essentially said that he's okay with men that identify as women to use women's bathrooms. And he was asked specifically if Caitlyn Jenner wanted to use the women's bathroom at Trump Towers, would he be fine? He's like, I don't mind. So that was his stance in 2016. Do you know if his stance has shifted since then?
I can't speak for him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thought I'd ask, because I saw that video earlier, which was really interesting because it contradicts recent things he said. My guess would be that his stance has changed since then. Like, the reason it's changed, in my opinion, is because in many people's perspective, we've gone
too far.
Exactly. And this is kind of like, even some people that don't mind addressing someone else by whatever pronoun they want, but because the left in against some people's perspective have gone too far left and they've gone too extreme, you take a stand, similar to your hashtag. What was your hashtag?
Hold the line.
Hold the line. You hold the line by taking even a stand on things you were okay with before, but because you've gone extreme, I'm not okay with this even.
Correct.
Until we get back in the middle somehow.
Yep. We have to get back to being more centered on this and more grounded. Like, the fact that they have just gone after me so hard and are threatening to kill me and do horrible things to me, it's only going to make my position even more cemented. And it's going to change the hearts and minds of people who were once okay with certain issues and policies, who are not going to be okay with that anymore, because that's where the barometer is changing. People are not, because you're shoving this down our throats, people are going to be less okay with other social policies. Right, that's just the way it's gonna. Yeah, exactly. That's the way it's gonna be.
No, I agree.
They're totally off the rails.
Well, good luck on this adventure that you're on. It seems like a dangerous one based on the death threats you've received, and hopefully there's going to be some sort of middle ground, some sort of solution, because it does feel like the U.S. has gone far left, but the tide does seem to be shifting. And at the end of the day, the incentive of the politicians is to obviously do what their voters want them to do, and if the public, and as we've seen the numbers, is starting to wake up to a lot of these changes or extremes that we're seeing, then politicians will have to obviously change their stances accordingly. I do want to talk about another topic that I'd never thought I'd be doing an interview on. It's something that was, I'm not sure if you were in the same position a few years ago, but whenever someone mentioned aliens and UFOs and abductions, put it aside. I'm like, come on, okay, there's more important problems here. I don't think it's happened. It sounds a bit, conspiratorial, put that tin hat on. But I don't think, for there to be a congressional hearing on the topic, tinfoil hats are off now. It's another thing that is on the tables to discuss. You were in those hearings. You said, I've got some quotes from you as well. My first question is more of a general question. why are we having a hearing on UFOs, UAPs today? And why is the world, I won't say waking up to this, but why is the world starting to discuss this matter more than ever before?
Because the government's been lying to us for decades. And the UAP issue, and I'm skeptical, okay? I want evidence. I want to see an alien on a gurney before I admit to you, hey, there are extraterrestrial in the universe. Like, roll that thing in on a gurney so everybody can see it. But it's a bipartisan issue. I mean, Democrats and Republicans, it's actually a unifying issue because of the secrecy of the federal government and certain federal agencies who've hidden information, maybe even from the President of the United States, but who've certainly hidden information from Congress. So there was a report, just for example, from this agency called AARO, A-A-R-O, that is supposed to be tracking UAP anomalies. And they put a report out, their first report they put out in May of this year. And they said every single unidentified aerial phenomenon has been debunked. We have an answer for all of them. And so the answer is 0, that there are no unknown flying objects out there. We know what they are in every single case, which right off the bat, you know is a lie, because statistically, it's never going to be 0, right? So if there's nothing there, then why lie about it? And then there's the whole idea of overclassification. Like the American public can't know how much of their money, their tax dollars, are being spent on UAP programs. Have we been lied to about crash retrieval programs? We have multiple witnesses now under oath on the stand saying yes. Then they're saying we are learning from the technology and reverse engineering the technology. So then it's a national security issue. Are we winning the arms race if there's an arms race? And we have multiple witnesses under oath saying there is an arms race. So from that perspective, just from a national security perspective, defense and offensive perspective, just government transparency, before we even talk about little green men, you know that you're being lied to. And it's crazy to me that this is where we are. And so I'm hoping that we'll have more disclosure, even if it's controlled disclosure. I agree, if this is out there, we want to make sure that we are protecting technology if we have it and we own it and we're using it. I would like to know that China doesn't have it. I want to know that Russia doesn't have access to it, or Iran. I want to know that we are doing our best to protect it. If it's in the hands of private government contractors, as we learned in our last hearing a couple weeks ago, who are those contractors and who has access to the information and technology? I would want to make sure that it is absolutely protected. And if it's with private contractors, are they doing that to skirt the law and the Constitution? There are all sorts of constitutional questions. And so a lot of people have been sending me, there's so much documentation out there, declassified information now. Like, I've seen memos between the FBI and the US Army where they're saying, we'll help you with this crash retrieval program, but you have to give us access to the crashed craft that the government tells us doesn't exist. So it's just, I am more of a believer now today than I was, but I want evidence. I want facts. I want data. I want spreadsheets. It's got to be black and white. There has to be information. I've got to be able to see it and put my hands on it.
Yeah, I think it's a position of, even if you're a skeptic, if they don't exist, then what are they hiding? Exactly.
And why are we spending money on it? And it's not like a little bit of money.
No, it's
We're spending significant sums of money, and it's classified, or I would tell you, but we're spending significant sums of money on these programs. And I can't even
We
tell
probably
you how
don't
much.
pass the audit either, along with the rest of the Pentagon.
Pentagon's never passed an audit.
You said something about there's a program called the Immaculate Constellation. You quoted saying it's an unacknowledged special access program that your government says does not exist. Journalist Michael Schellenberger, who was there, great journalist, says a source warned that simply printing the name Immaculate Constellation could trigger government surveillance of me under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or whoever publishes it. What do you know so far about Immaculate Constellation? That's number one. And how can it, like, for people that don't understand how the government works, how can you as a member of Congress, how can you not know about a program that the US government is running?
Well, if you don't know the name of the program, you can't ask about it when you're in the SCIF. I've been in the SCIF. I've been in a classified setting, but if you don't know the name of the classified program, you don't know what questions to ask. And so they'll just tell you, nothing exists. There's no documentation, nothing, because you're not asking the right question. And so when the names of these programs are hidden from us, We don't know how to get the information. We don't know when we're looking into the Intel budget or the DOD Pentagon budget. We don't know what the programs are on the line items for the budget either. And so if you don't have that information, you can't verify that it exists. And so it's so compartmentalized. And I'm grateful for the Michael Schellenbergers of the world, the Jeremy Corbells of the world, the George Knapps of the world, those that are John Greenwald's another one. There are these reporters and journalists and podcasters that are out there that are trying to sift through the information and provide it to the American people, because they're not telling Congress, and they're certainly not telling the rest of the population.
So now that you know about the term Immaculate Constellation, are you allowed to ask about it in a skiff?
We can, but I would imagine when we do, and we'll probably go into a skiff and be able to ask questions in the future, and I would hope that we're going to be able to do that again. We've done it before. But the problem is, it's probably already got a new name. And because we don't know the name, we don't know what program to ask for. Does that make sense?
That is so weird. That's how it works in the world's biggest democracy. But when you talked about the Arrow program, that's part of I think it's part of the Immaculate Constellation program. There's just so many terms I've lost track.
Yeah.
And just for anyone listening, essentially it's a program that investigates UAPs and non-human life here, and that's all we know about it. We just don't know anything else. All we know is that it investigates UAPs, and I think the stance of the Immaculate Constellation also, does it have any stance? Is there any comments at all on where they stand?
None.
All we know is that this is a program.
They're in denial. I mean, the government says it doesn't exist.
Oh, they're still saying okay. So you can't ask how much is being spent on. But can the government tell you that?
Yes.
Or would they say something?
Well, the amount. So I know how much is spent on Arrow.
Okay.
And I know how much they're requesting for this fiscal year. I'm not allowed to share that information because the amount of money is classified. How stupid is that?
The Arrow program did acknowledge the existence of the Kona Blue program. Don't know what that is anymore. Intended to reverse engineer any recovered UAP technology, but noted that the program never went into effect because no such technology was ever recovered. I understand. So like, hey, we have this program. We're meant to investigate UAPs. But there was no extraterrestrial equipment or ships or UAPs that were spotted, that were found here in the US. So therefore the program did not yield any results. But that kind of contradicts the information you had, because you know how much was spent on there, which you cannot share, which I assume was an amount, because you said it's a large amount. Exactly, which means there must have been something there. Otherwise, what's that amount going towards?
And then the other thing is, too, what they've done to whistleblowers. What they've done to discredit people who've come forward, whether it's Bob Lazar. I learned about him a couple weeks ago. You know, they said he didn't work at that facility, yet his name was on a manifest for working at that facility. You look at David Grush, right? Here's a guy that they said was lying under oath, and his testimony was not credible. If he wasn't credible, why did they go to such great lengths to expose and violate HIPAA and share his medical records with the world in media stories? That's what they did to him. So if he's not credible, why go to such lengths to threaten him and discredit him publicly? I mean, it just doesn't, I'm not a mathematician. It doesn't add up. It just doesn't add up to me.
There was a quote you said in the hearing. If I say, you've got some great snippets. If I say Immaculate Constellation, I'll be on some list. What is that list? Who controls that list? How and why? So obviously these are questions you're asking.
Yeah, supposedly it's like deep state kind of stuff. And if you say it, you're going to be on some list. They'll get a FISA warrant. They'll spy on you. I don't know if that's the case.
But you can't get a FISA warrant on you, or they can technically.
That they can't. They could technically. That's
and you would not know about it. And that's a warrant essentially that allows them to spy on you.
Yeah, and I don't support warrantless spying on American citizens. I mean, that's the libertarian in me. But we know that it happens, and it's happened a lot in this country. And I hope with the new administration will address warrantless wiretapping, warrantless spying on American citizens. I hope that gets addressed in the new administration too.
So talking about the FISA warrant, how does that work? Who approves it? What court approves it? And how can you not even find out about it? I'm trying to understand how the system works.
The FISA court, one of our three-letter agencies can go to a FISA court and say, we have this information, and
all done in stealth.
Yeah, we need to pull their metadata, pull their records, spy on them. It was created in post 9/11 to prevent terrorism from happening. But what we know now, what we didn't know then, is that opening up this Pandora's box means that citizens of the United States, basic civil rights are being violated. because of the data that they're collecting on people who are innocent, haven't done any wrongdoing, that are being spied on by the government.
So walking into the hearings, how much knowledge before the hearings, before you started researching, etc., preparing for the hearings, how much knowledge did you have about the topic then?
Very little. And in fact, we had a UAP hearing last year with David Grush and 2 other former military service members.
You were in those hearings as well?
I was in those hearings as well. And I didn't know a whole lot about the topic. I wasn't briefed on it. But I'm just a normal human. I'm just like a regular person who has questions. And I asked about the pilots, like who was flying the craft. Were the bodies of the dead pilots collected, retrieved? And David Grush said that they were. And I was like, well, what was this? And he used the term non-human biologics. So it was the first time I'd ever heard this terminology before, didn't know what it was.
Biologics.
Non-human biologics. And so, since that time, I've tried to educate myself on the topic, and I hosted my own hearing about it this year. I think it would be good to have at least one hearing a year on the subject and try to get more information. The U.S. Senate is going to have a hearing in December on the topic of UAPs, and we've heard from a number of senators like Marco Rubio and others who've been briefed at, I think, even a higher level than U.S. House members.
The Gang of 8, I think it's called.
Right. They have even more information than we do. And so I will be very interested. I will be sitting on the edge of my seat watching the Senate hearing, because for me it's about transparency, it's about accountability, and if there's nothing there, why are we being lied to? And I think that's my biggest issue right now. And then the second part, of course, is the national security component.
Is it aliens visiting us?
But are we learning from this technology? Do we have it? Does China have it? Does Russia, Iran? That's very concerning to me as someone who's on the House Armed Services Committee. I want to make sure our adversaries, if there is technology out there, that they're not reverse engineering it, that we have the capability to do it, that we're winning the arms race if one so exists.
Luis Elizondo. And I've got a quote: I believe we are in the midst of a multi-decade secretive arms race, one funded by misallocated taxpayer dollars and headed from our elected representatives and oversight bodies. And this goes back to the term you used earlier, deep state. Obviously, different people define it differently. But the way I look at it is unelected officials embedded within a system that allows them to maintain power. And even in some cases more power than those elected by
that is 100%
by the voters.
In the simplest definition, that's what it is.
So the question I wanted to ask you, because it is 2 parts to it. Actually, you kind of broke it into 3. Number 1 is the transparency aspect of it. Why are these different organizations, why do they have the ability to hide so much information, classify whatever they want? As I was researching this, the amount of classification, like the way that they're able to classify information so easily based on it becoming a national security risk, is creating all these different conspiracies that everyone's trying to speculate on, from the JFK assassination to obviously what we're going to see now with Epstein Island.
Why is it still classified? Why has no one been arrested for Jeffrey Epstein? It's the biggest open and shut pedophile case we've had in our hands, and no one's going to jail for it.
President Trump is going to shake things up. Like he says he's going to open up these files,
and
declassify
JFK
them.
assassination.
He was going to, but then he said, even Trump stepped back. Like he was going to declassify them. And then I think it was a Joe Rogan podcast where he said the way he explained it in the latest interview was like, I was going to declassify them. I've gone through them, but I think he said like it impacts people. It could still be a risk, a security risk, and it impacts people that are still alive. And I decided not to declassify it. But then I think he said, I will declassify it if I'm back in office. That's what I think he said. I could be wrong.
I hope that he will declassify, because even if people involved are still alive, the American people deserve the truth.
Exactly.
Jinx.
But it gets. So I understand the tricky position that those different organizations are in, because. I can't remember who it was, decades and decades ago, maybe President Eisenhower, I can't remember who it was. It said something along the lines of, we cannot share this information because it threatens the security from a fee perspective. Everyone will just get too scared, and even threatens the religious institutions that allow the company to function. A lot of people are religious. If there's aliens, that start questioning your religion. So that was their concern, which I think is a valid concern. You can't just share everything. There's certain things, there's intelligence for a reason. But then it gets abused. And if you give them the ability to abuse it, and if you don't allow elected officials, those that are elected, to decide what should be and should not be classified, it gets abused. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. But what is your stance? Like, it is a fascinating topic. Now that you've gone through the hearings, you've gone deeper into that world. what was your stance before you started researching the topic? Let's say 1 to 10. 1 being 100% they don't exist, non-human life does not exist, or at least we haven't seen it. 10 being it exists, it's out there. What was your stance beforehand? And I'm trying to simplify it with numbers. And what is your stance after?
I would say I was always a 2 or a 3.
Okay,
That this doesn't exist. Like, maybe there's a curiosity. It's fascinating. It's interesting content. Great documentaries and podcasts. Like, it's interesting and movies. It's interesting content, right? But you know, as I have been in an elected office now, know that there are certain programs that exist, and knowing that it's hidden from the American public and even members of Congress, it's like, why all the secrecy? I mean, I'm not, like you said, should we be disclosing everything? No. But there should be some disclosure, controlled disclosure, to rebuild trust in the government. People don't trust the government. I don't trust the government. That's why I'm in this gig, is I don't trust. And they've not given us...
And you're part of the government.
Yeah, and it's weird because I got into this thing because of my distrust for the government and being a skeptical and always questioning things. But as I've gotten into it, it's like, well, if nothing's going on, why are we hiding so much?
So
it's weird to me.
Is it above 5 now?
I'd say I'm a 5 or a 6.
Oh wow, it's a big shift.
So I'm getting further there, but I want evidence. I'm an evidence-based person.
Have you given it much thought? Obviously, you're very busy on a daily basis. You're dealing with a lot. Have you sat down and started really thinking about it? What does that mean for life in general, from a religious perspective, for national security as well? Because that's another topic.
My national security is my biggest concern. Obviously, institutions and civility and civilization and religion, like but I'm Christian. I mean, I wear my faith every day. It doesn't bother me, the idea of life forms elsewhere, and we know that there's biological life elsewhere. We've seen evidence of cells and amino acids and whatever else out there in other places. But that doesn't the idea doesn't bother me as a Christian. I mean, it's just, are we safe? Is there technology we're utilizing? That's the stuff that I want to know. I want to make sure that our adversaries don't have access to technology that could defeat freedom, right? At some point in the future.
Talking about adversaries, how do you think that this is kept a secret for so long among all these different countries? Like, not only is the US keeping it secret, we've got Europe doing the same. I'm sure they've come across similar things. And at least we've heard about crashes in different countries, Latin America. I'm sure there's in Africa.
Latin America's been pretty good about showing some of the files,
yeah,
government documents.
I can't remember which country it happened in.
Brazil or
viral. It went viral. Now I remember. But then do you think there could be an organization or a body or some sort of communication? You know, countries like Russia and the US are not speaking, obviously, because of the war. But do you think there's behind the scenes?
I have no idea. That's why I would like to know.
That's fascinating.
Is there a strategic plan? If there is, like, there's a million questions that I have that, as a member of Congress, I can't get access to the answers.
Yeah, I see. Even there's a question that Luis asked. He makes a very interesting point. Is that he says there's capabilities and intent. So obviously they're there. We know they're capable because we're still trying to understand that technology, and there's all these different examples where we just cannot make sense of it based on our understanding of the world and where we are technologically. But then there's intent. Now I've given that some thought, and based on all the stories we've seen, there hasn't been any malintent. We don't know a lot. We don't know what we don't know, but from what we've seen, even the stories, like there was that story that Obama, I think, made a documentary about. I can't remember who it was, but they were driving and they were taken away from their car, apparently taken by the aliens in their spaceship, and then returned back. Everyone's been returned back. No one's been abducted and never been seen. At least I haven't seen any stories. So the intent doesn't seem too concerning. But I want to read what Obama said about this.
Okay.
And get your thoughts on it. And I'll read what Trump said. So Obama says, when it comes to aliens, there are some things I just can't tell you on air. Which is is
that a tease?
Exactly.
Was he teasing?
Exactly. I think it's finding some sort of middle ground. You don't have to share all the intelligence, the military intelligence, but giving some information to the public so they know where we stand. I think that most people, like now what we're seeing is they're kind of feeding us the information slowly. My guess would be, and like when someone asks me, like, why do you think we're seeing the hearings right now? If I had to guess, I'd say, like, they know that they'll have to disclose that information. It's already coming out. They don't know what to expect under a Trump presidency. So what they're doing is they're slowly feeding the public that information voluntarily, whether it's leaking them out or through hearings like this, or through closed door meetings, through different skiffs. and then slowly allow the people to accept it. Similar to what we saw in COVID. If in the middle of COVID people found out it came from China, from a lab, we don't know if it's fact, but it's looking more and more
U.S.
likely.
tax dollars paid for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People would have gone crazy.
Yeah.
It would have been mayhem. But what they've done is they've kind of fed that information slowly. So eventually, voluntarily or not, but if it was voluntary, they've done it slowly. So eventually, people accepted it. We know that this potentially came out from a lab that was funded by the U.S. People that are still, holding the positions they hold today. No one has been prosecuted.
Yeah.
And it's become the norm for us, despite all the deaths that we've seen.
And thank God for Rand Paul. I mean, he's the one that has gotten all that information and facts out to the American public. And, would people have been upset at the beginning? Yes, but I think the truth, sooner rather than later, right at the outset, would have solved a lot of our problems if we had just been told the truth. And I'm so grateful for Rand Paul for exposing all of the government lies on this. He's done a really remarkable job.
He has, and a lot of people that were considered conspiracy theorists before are now being listened to as experts. Louise also, we talked about Louise, he's being respected more and more as time passes, and we're starting to see what, not only the things being hidden, but the lies that we're getting from the government. But then my question is, we're kind of shifting to, we've got an image of Trump, he's staring at us.
Cardboard Trump.
Cardboard Trump. So how much change would you expect under a Trump, not only Trump presidency, Trump, Elon, RFK presidency, Tulsi, and the rest of the cabinet? How much change do you think they'll be able to bring within 4 years?
I think it's going to be tougher than people realize. I'm an optimist. I want to see the glass half full. I would like to see some disruption in the federal government. I took the shot. I thought I was doing my civic duty to take the COVID shot. Well, I have so many health complications. I'm vaccine injured, not from the first shot, but from the second one. I have asthma now. I have chest pains every week, and I have tremors in my right hand.
After the shot, you got them?
After the second shot, not the first one. But I advertised I was getting it. I don't want the government to mandate it. I was never a mandate person, but I thought I was doing good for my community by saying I'm going to go get the shot and I'm going to protect myself and others around me. Turns out I'm injured as a result of it. My health has never been the same since. I can't do cardio anymore. I can't work out. It's been deeply problematic for my health. And I regret taking it. I'm thankful I didn't get my kids the shot because I wouldn't want their health to be affected the way that mine has been. But we need more people that are going to tell the truth on every topic. But I think it'll be hard. There are bureaucrats in these agencies. There are U.S. senators that won't confirm these individuals. And there are bureaucrats that will do everything they can to stop Donald Trump and his nominees. And look what Biden just did with Ukraine. Everybody wants Ukraine to win. I want Ukraine to win. But what he did was escalate tensions in Ukraine. And we saw Russia 3 days later, after Biden gave Ukraine the go-ahead to use our missiles in Russia, we saw Putin take a hypersonic intermediate range ballistic missile and shoot it at Ukraine. And so immediately they're already undermining Trump, who wants to de-escalate tensions in Israel and the Middle East. He wants to de-escalate and bring peace to Ukraine and Russia. He has a real opportunity to do that, but he can't do it until he's president. And so already there have been severe consequences to those in the federal government, in the Biden-Harris administration, who want to undermine a Trump presidency. They're already doing it. And what they do will be even worse. And they might even cause World War III before he gets sworn into office.
I don't know. I spoke to an advisor to President Putin last week. So an advisor that helped him draft the new nuclear doctrine. I had a discussion with him. If you listen to it, it's a very logical discussion. Obviously, I think the war is wrong. What Putin did is wrong. Ukraine deserves to get their territory back, which I think is not feasible now where we are.
It's not feasible anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I got to be realistic. I've got loved ones. I've got people in Ukraine. I was in Ukraine weeks before the war. But so I had a discussion with him, and his position was very, very, very clear. It's like, we do not want to escalate. He's given many examples where, President Putin is seeking peace, but the question is at what cost? So obviously, Trump said he'll end the war within 24 hours, which I think more symbolic, like he'll end it as quickly as possible. Even if it was within 3 months, it's much better than what we've seen under the current administration. But you seemed a bit skeptical, not skeptical, but I think I'd say skeptical in how much change he could bring. Some people are maybe too optimistic, and we see that with every new president.
Yeah.
People get too optimistic and then they get disappointed. Always, historically, in every country. Right. So, but the question is why? I think his intentions are to shake up the government. We're seeing that now with action. How far do you think he can go? Like what? Like for the JFK files being one example where he wanted to declassify them, but then he didn't, and he gave a reason, but now he wants to again. What do you think is happening behind the scenes?
It's hard to say. I know that the transition team is working very hard to fill positions and hire people for the new administration. But you know, there are going to be roadblocks. There are going to be people that try to stop him at every turn. And I just hope that he has, even if it's just incremental, even if he gets 20% done of what he wants to do, that would be huge change for the country. But there are going to be people standing in his way every step of the way. So
when you say standing in the way, and I'm not digging in, because for people outside the government, we look at, especially people who don't even get the chance to speak to people like yourself. So I'm even privileged to be able to speak to you, and I'm still like just trying to understand, what don't we see? So obviously, what can you share? So if someone's trying to stop President Trump, what would you say these discussions, and move away from Trump, stop anybody, the establishment trying to stop any elected official? Let's make it more general. Yes. So what would these discussions look like? I'm not sure if you've had any such discussions, anyone's confronted you about UAPs or other issues, but what would it be like? What would they be like? Hey, you have to drop this issue, or
well, we saw years ago within one of the three-letter agencies, you know, we saw communications and messaging between text messages and emails with bureaucrats in these positions trying to stop Trump. I mean, in anyone in his administration. So like that is a cultural issue. Like, we got to put the Constitution first regardless of party. And I'm someone who has held Republicans and Democrats to the same exact standard. Whatever the standard is, it has to apply to everyone. But we have to build that culture inherently, internally, in every U.S. government agency. These people should not feel emboldened. They shouldn't feel like they are better than and more powerful than the President of the United States. But that culture exists, and we've got to eliminate it. Like, if you don't like the new head of whatever agency he's going to appoint someone in, you can quit. I mean, you can go to, like, I hope that thousands of people quit. I mean, you have 52% of the federal government right now that don't go into the office, don't go into work. So if the requirement is, hey, you got to come into work 5 days a week now, oh, I'm going to quit because of that, fine. Go find a job in the private sector where you have to go into work. So it's interesting to me, but we have to make sure that, you know, we put the American people first regardless of politics. So for example, I'm the only member of Congress who's voted to hold both sides in contempt. When you've been subpoenaed to come...
The only member?
I'm the only one.
Respect. Yeah,
I mean, it's usually, you know, Republicans are protecting Republicans, Democrats protecting Democrats, but that standard, if you're subpoenaed, you come before Congress. If not, you go to jail. I'm the only one that has voted that way to hold both sides to the same standard.
Did you get much pushback when you held the conservative side?
Oh, for sure, I do. But I'm a constitutionalist before I'm a Republican. Like, the Constitution is the document that our nation was founded upon, and that matters more than anything else because that's what puts our citizens first.
I want to. So I was just researching some numbers. I saw it mentioned by the All In podcast about employment in California. Over 90% of it was government employment, which is pretty.
Really?
I'm trying to. So I remember.
That's crazy.
So they mentioned it in the podcast. My team tweeted it and they retweeted it, and that's how I noticed it. So my team tweeted. I should probably know what it is,
crazy.
But I don't remember what it was. If the numbers are accurate, it's. I need to look into it further because it just doesn't make sense. It's pretty concerning. But that kind of brings to the question about a lot of people that even dislike Trump, they're not voting for President Trump, they're voting for the people around him as well. So it's a lot of people like, I don't like Trump. I'm still, very against a lot of his stances or his personality, especially his personality. But I love what Elon stands for. I love what RFK stands for. RFK, it had his own support group, support base that's not, a lot of them don't like Trump. So what Elon and Vivek are doing with DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency.
It's a beautiful thing. Okay. I cannot wait to see. I mean, they're the ones that I learned this through DOGE, that we sent $1.1 million to study Russian cats on treadmills. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we paying millions of dollars to buy puppy parts from Chinese wet markets? Your tax dollars. That's what so the what they are doing, because I don't have enough staff in the day to be able to expose all of the nonsense that's happening with your tax dollars. I mean, we're paying NGOs that hire and retain terrorists. in the Middle East. I mean, we're paying NGOs to tell illegals how to migrate to our country and then how to vote when they get here. I mean, we don't have enough staff in the day to be able to expose all this, but DOGE can. And I can't wait to see everything that they come up with and show all of the wasteful things that, regardless if you're Republican or Democrat, you would never want your tax dollars to pay for.
So it goes back to the point where we're talking about the roadblocks they'll face. Again, I'm also an optimist.
Yeah.
But we do have the president that was almost shot in the head, or that was shot in the ear.
He was shot.
Exactly. That was shot in the ear just a few months ago. Now, seeing how much change they're bringing to the current establishment, to the systems that are already embedded, people will not give up their power, their influence. Same way with company. I have multiple companies. When I have one of my companies I built 12 years ago, I don't even try to bring change to it. I just let it be. I'm the sole owner. I own the company. I founded it from nothing. But I'm like, it's not worth the headache of going in and trying to change things, because I know I'll face a lot of resistance, because they're well intentioned, but they're just used to doing things the way they're doing it.
Yeah.
We're going to see the same thing now in the U.S. government, but we're going to see it from people that have a lot of influence, a lot of power. Do you worry that we could see, being optimistic, but do you worry we could see, I wouldn't say attempts on their life, that's too extreme, but dirty tactics to try to stop Elon, Vivek, and others?
Oh, for sure. I mean, yes.
What tactics would those be?
I don't know what they would be.
Like leaking online information?
Oh,
about
for sure. I mean, that's what the establishment does. I mean, I just went through it. I had a Republican primary. It was really nasty this year, particularly. And just the stuff they would make up, and then just plant stories in the press.
About you?
Yeah, for sure. Things that were just totally not true. No, some of it was true. When I'm like, hey, guilty. Like, yeah, that's me. But a lot of it was just not true. And there's nothing I could do about it. I'm a public figure. I just have to sit there and suck it up. And hope and pray that my hard work will win, that the truth will win. And it did. I won by almost 30 points in that Republican primary. But they did everything they could to hurt me.
Do you ever worry that, as an elected official, do you ever worry get concerned from your own government? Oh,
for sure. I do have concerns, especially the more that I expose, the more outspoken I am. I have great concerns. Like after last week, I was like, what are they going to do to me next for this? I mean, that thought crosses your mind. Are my kids safe? Is my family safe from the government? Because you hear stuff all the time that people being targeted for different things.
Is that after, when you said last week, the transgender?
The transgender, okay. I don't want penises in my bathroom debate. There's just a very logical, common sense. Rape victims shouldn't be forced to change in front of men. Like, that's just...
That worries you more than the UAP findings that they've been trying to hide for decades and decades?
Yep.
That's insane to even say that. Like, if talking about whether men could be in female bathrooms and who identifies as what, great issue. It's a social issue. We can all fight about it. But then to say this is causing you more concerns and more...
Gives me more heartburn than exposing information about UAPs.
And national security.
Yep. Yep, because they're organized and they're dangerous. And there are people within the government that sympathize. And that they're really, these people, they're deeply passionate about a really sick issue. And something's just not right upstairs with some of them. Yeah.
And I feel like, as I researched this before the interview, I feel like your stance and your perception of that group of people went from very understanding, again, please do correct me if I get it wrong, but very understanding position, treating them as equals, that they deserve the same rights that me and you have, to, I'd say now, and some people perceive it as another extreme where you just see them as dangerous, probably because of what you've gone through.
7 days like that. I mean,
because of all the threats.
Yeah, I'm not nice anymore about this. I mean, I'm just not going to be nice about it. This is a line in the sand for me, and I will do what it takes to do the right thing.
What would you say is the worst 2-3 threats to kind of?
Well, I mean, obviously threatening to rape me and threatening to kill me. Those are the most egregious ones. I mean, all over.
From a transgender person.
Oh yeah, I was getting hundreds of death threats a day last week.
Hundreds. There's 0.5% of the population.
I've never seen anything like it. I have never in my life, and I've been targeted for a lot of. I've been targeted by both sides of the aisle from time to time, depending on what position I've taken. This is the worst I've ever seen it. I mean, hands down, by far, 100x the worst I've ever seen anything.
Why? And just for people listening, like I empathize with anyone that wants me to address them however they want. I do that. I'm very open-minded. Full freedom, do whatever you like. So that's my position.
Yep.
But even being in this position, I would want to ask, like, how can 0.5% of the population be so vocal, have so much influence. I want them to have their rights, but to be able to have that much influence before an election on issues that are harming the Democratic Party, and to scare people, like, not scare, but say to get you
the
concerned.
fear of God in me and my family. That's what they tried to do. And all I did was embolden me. Like, I don't care how you dress.
But why?
I don't care if you want to chop off your body parts, but you're not going to do it to kids, and the government's not going to pay for it. And you're not going to force that on me at all.
But what, and my last question is, why do you think that such a small percentage of the population is so vocal and
I don't
in your
understand
experience,
it. I don't understand
so violent?
I mean, I think that there, like a lot of things in this country, we have a mental health crisis on our hands. And I think a number of these people truly need help. If you're willing to kill over the right for your penis to be in my bathroom, you got issues. And we don't have enough mental health counselors, it sounds like, in the country to help these people. I mean, they need to get help. This is not normal. It's not normal, and it's not safe.
I want to do an interview with Caitlin. Me and Caitlin have been speaking for a while, Caitlin Jenner, to do an interview, months, but just kept, didn't work out. But I think now, it's a better time than ever to have that discussion, because I think the issue's back on the table. Kind of got put aside for a few months. People were very vocal about it and very polarized on X, at least a few months ago, if you remember, a year ago or so.
Yeah.
Remember, I used to do shows about it and it would just blow up. And then people kind of moved on to other more important issues. Some would argue more important, inflation, unemployment, etc. But now, obviously, you're bringing it back on the table. So it'd be a great discussion to have. Congresswoman, it's been an incredible discussion, getting you to know you as a person. Good luck on that fight. And I'd be pretty excited to see also what you come out with on, if you have time to keep looking into the UAP side of things.
Oh, I can walk and chew gum at the same time. Inch deep and a mile wide. There are a lot of issues that I enjoy working on. This is just one of many.
Congresswoman, pleasure.
Yeah,
thank you so much. I
much.
appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
That was a good discussion.
That was great.